All right, let's get started. Everybody turn their mics on, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, God bless America.
There you go.
That's just sort of the same thing.
Okay, let's get started. We're awaiting two more members to show up, and we're also awaiting the mayor to show up with Leon Costello in tow, hopefully, to discuss with us the budget. So let's jump around and use our agenda. Let's go to that item number 8, just to get that out of the way. And I wanted to share with you folks something that I think maybe you could have in your back pocket as a sort of a little cheat sheet. Because at the previous, at last month's council meeting, for the public, who was a former councilman, made some comments concerning whether or not the city ought to be, I guess, generally looking at other revenues, business revenues, and sort of created the impression that there was some sort of a divide between the work of this committee and the public interest in general, in particular, the business community. I don't know if anybody had a chance to hear that or see that on the meetings, but I think just to calm the air a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Calm the air a little bit, I went back and pulled up some things that I think talking points or response points, if you will, just to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing here. And so if you look at that little sheet I passed around, did you get one?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. I think it's important to stress, we've been working, pass that over there too. Pull up a chair at the tables.
Yeah, come right over here. We'll squeeze in.
We've been doing now, I guess, what is this, 3 years we've been doing this, Russ? Mm-hmm. But it's always good to go back and find out why we're doing it. So I pulled together some ideas that I hope will help the discussion come back to a positive tone. And I think it's important to stress now that this is not about, we're not trying to create a divergence between any one group of the community versus another group of the community. We're really about the charge that the council gave this committee 3 years ago, and it's basically the items I highlighted in red. Our job is to find alternate sources of revenue, to find new and innovative ways to finance the provision of municipal services, to maintain a stable tax and a rateable base, and to maintain the city's property taxes at a minimum level necessary to provide necessary services. So it's pretty clear what we're about, and I know that ruffles some feathers once in a while, because what we're talking about is new sources of revenue. So when you talk about a new source of revenue, obviously the pushback is going to be, well, we never did that before. But unfortunately, that's the task we're about, and we understand that when we try as a committee, and we have for 3 years, to make an effort to explain why we're doing what we're doing and whether or not it works, and if it works, urge council to consider it.
And I think, Dennis, I mean, having been on the committee for about a year and a half, I think that there's always a very healthy discussion and dialogue if, everyone's not in accord or in an agreement sometimes with,
No.
with the, and I think that, there are instances in which it may be a revenue generator, but doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that the committee wants to recommend for one reason or another.
And it also doesn't necessarily mean that the council will accept what our recommendation is.
Exactly, right.
Because our job is not to do this.
Right.
Our job is to find ways to do it.
Right.
and then pass it on to the policy.
So I think it meets two thresholds, in my opinion. First, this group wanting to, make a decision as to whether or not they endorse something, and the second is whether or not council then would accept that recommendation. So I do think that at times it appears that, our view might be very micro in how we do things, but I think that it's shown that, certainly by your leadership, there's been creative ways of looking at generating revenue. Whether or not all of them are endorsed and move forward, is just,
Yeah.
that happens, yeah, so,
I think that's pretty accurate.
right.
I mean, like, as I've said before on a couple of occasions, we'll fill the trough with water, but somebody else is gonna have to drink it if they wanna drink it.
Were you able to respond to this concern?
No, I was actually gonna do it this week, this month's meeting, but I wanted to share this with you guys, because this is something I think council ought to hear from MTRAC. So
Yeah.
this is kind of what we're gonna talk to them about on Tuesday. We'll have ourselves put on that agenda. A couple of these other points that they do bear repeating, and that is that we're dealing with the reality in Cape May, that it is a business. Just on sales tax receipts alone, we generate upwards in excess of, or short of $300 million a year that flows into the state. I mean, it is a business, and we're living in a business, and the business generates the need for municipal services. The municipal services generate the need for revenue, so it's fair game to say that who generates the need for services needs to be paying for those services. 50,000 people on any given day in the summertime are enjoying Cape May and the services we provide. And this other point too, if you look around the state, you'll see this is true. Cape May is very different in that the revenue sources in Cape May are a lot more varied than they are across the state. Most towns, like Pete Irata, who lives in Little Ferry, all know Pete, his municipal budget is, or was when he was on the council, almost completely, 98% of the revenue came from property taxes, because there was no other source of revenue.
Right.
So
Right.
we're different here. We're a different kind of community, and we have to recognize that fact.
Right.
And to the extent that we are a business, that 30% of our residential ratables are licensed businesses. And there's probably more when we get a better handle on that. But here's the point that's interesting, and it often gets lost, I think, in the give and take about whether or not we're anti-business. And that is that the commercial interest in the city, in fact, are property taxpayers. And so whatever we can do to keep the property taxes down is a benefit to them as well. The data shows that 9% of the ratables are commercial properties, but they generate 20% of the property taxes. And so it's important to realize that whatever property tax relief can be established for anybody, the commercial interest is probably more than the residential taxpayer do, simply because they pay a huge amount of property
Right.
tax. So anyway, that's my little spiel on that, so.
Okay. No, I think this is a good,
I'll buy into that.
right.
If it's all right with you, I'll go to the council and tell them this, just to set the
Big
record straight.
divide between the locals.
Yeah, I thought it was funny, there was a comment on one of the Cape May Lives about the paragliders that were out there, and they said, I guess MTRAC will be taxing.
Yeah.
Taxing us.
Who said that?
It was on Cape May Live.
One of the Cape May Lives.
Which I put a frowny face.
I saw,
Yeah.
I saw.
Don't put a funny face, it's good. At least they know what we're about, right?
So the elevator, I was struck by the same comments. I was at the city council meeting, and the elevator speech was that property taxes account for only 45% of the revenue, which the implication was that's less than half. But it's the single largest source by far.
Yeah, and if you'll turn to this sheet I gave you in your handouts, that's exactly what the point is. In terms of looking at this budget, every year, this pie chart is basically the same. And if you look at and that's just what I wanted to talk to Zach and Leon about, but we'll talk about it now too. If you look at the revenues in this budget, and you all have that little chart in front of you.
Sent us, right.
So if you look at the revenues, we're pulling in we're budgeted for 23% $23 million rather, for the budget this coming year. And 45% of that revenue comes from property taxes. But, for example, 17% of that revenue comes from surplus. So that's just free money sitting there. And that 27% of that revenue comes from the local revenues. And that's really what we're, as a committee, we've been looking at for the last 3 years. Why is it that so few dollars, relatively speaking, are generated in local revenue? Well, that's because most of those fees have not been changed in 25 years. And to the extent that those fees are increasing this year, it's because we now have the occupancy tax. We now have the residential rateable mercantile license increases. So you'll see more dollars in there this year than you will in previous years. But the reality is that the revenue pie is still coming almost half from property taxes, even though there's a lot of different ways to raise revenue that we've looked at as a committee and we were going to continue to look at as a committee.
You're talking about the budgeted dollars. I still would be shocked if I'm reading this right. And I'm struck by the fact that 22 actual property taxes were 11.8.
Yeah.
And yet our budgeted for 23 is 10.7. Why? I can't imagine it's going to go down.
Well, that's an interesting point, and it's because every year, for the last 3 years, the property tax rate has not changed. That's a fact. And the mayor is very proud of that, and I guess we all are too. But the point is, the rate doesn't change, but the dollars change because the properties are becoming more and more
I was going to say, my property taxes have gone up every year.
Yes,
So all I'm trying to say is that I don't think that the budgeted amount,
Budgeted to go down?
I'm sorry?
It's budgeted to go down, you're saying?
Yeah,
Well,
but
compared to actual, but not compared to
So-
budget.
The budget cycle in the municipality doesn't work the way that it does in business. So just because the actual was more, the budget last year was 10.6, this year it's 10.7.
I get it.
So there's a variety of things that happen during the course of the year, including collection of taxes from previous years that go into the current.
Well, yeah, I know, but I can't imagine, Martin, it's $1.1 million worth.
oh, no, when you sell 24 properties
Yeah.
at about twice as what they're assessed at.
Right.
You're going to find that that's. more dollars.
All of those properties that were torn down and built during that time,
Right,
or houses built on empty lots.
I understand, but they are ongoing property taxes we're going to be collecting,
No, but-
not one time.
Yeah, they're going to be collected every year.
That's my point.
Oh.
So the actual is going to be high. I guess
Right.
yeah.
The budget is very conservative.
it's an incredibly
right,
conservative
right,
budget.
right,
That's all I'm
right.
trying to say.
Well, that's another point we want to talk to Zach about.
Right.
But if you look at the chart that's attached to the pie, the city budgeted $23 million in property tax for last year, and they actually took in $27 million.
Right.
But keeping in mind, your point at the beginning, 45% is associated with property taxes. We're counting on 55% to come in from other sources. So taking that conservative approach, although, you could argue, well, Maureen, it came in more. There's no predicting what could happen during a summer season. I don't know if any of you saw the article where the rate of rentals has not been as high this year as was experienced in the last 2 to 3 years. And so, we rely on that revenue.
No, I
yeah.
understand, Maureen. I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah,
I could appreciate the fact
Yeah, no.
that occupancy tax might be down. I don't see property taxes.
No, I understand completely. I think this is a conservative approach, hoping that, the revenue comes in as strong as it has for the prior year in the property taxes, but knowing that there's a vulnerability always on the other revenue that the city relies on.
This was a chart that I sent around, but it's,
Well, and 20, what was the timing of, what, 22 presumably was just calculated actuals, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
recent, that number.
Right.
just-
And those numbers have,
The budget developed before that number was available. You would have had to budget for 23 before you.
yes, and you would have had, in some instances, honestly, you could have had revenue coming in from 22 taxes in '23, so,
So in hindsight, it's.
No, I get it.
yeah.
anyway.
But there is,
It is conservative, there's no doubt about it.
and
That's all I was trying to say.
there is a trend, and I think the question is not what happened this year. The question is this trend the best way to do things? The chart I just passed around to you, I also sent in the mail, but I made a hard copy for you because I really wanted you to make sure you saw the numbers. Take a look at that chart I just gave you. Because I went back to 2016 and looked at all of the budgets and all of the budgeted versus actual revenues, as well as the budgeted versus total surplus accumulations. And you see the trend pretty clearly on this. We're sending in a budget for adoption in March every year that's growingly conservative when it comes to revenue projections. If you, in 2016, as an example, we said we're going to have $19.1 million in revenue, and we actually got 20.9, which was 9% higher than we thought it was, we said it was gonna be. That difference continues to grow. This past budget was 18% higher than we thought it was gonna be.
That was the other question I had when I sent this out, and I'm sorry for my being naive about this, but, so how is
Your
the,
naivete is charming.
thanks.
I don't think you should be ashamed of it.
But 3.4 million is a budget surplus, as the, I guess that's what we have budgeted
Yeah.
versus the or $12 million. So I'm trying to get at, how is it that it's so only 3.4 million? And when the actual is obviously different, right?
Well, yeah, no, what you're looking at, the 3.4, is every year the budget is put together, a use of surplus is counted as revenue. It typically runs from, in 2016, it runs from 2.1 million. This past year it was 3.4 million. But the thing I want you to notice is that in that same 7-year period, the pot of surplus has grown from $4 million to last year.
That's my question.
$12 million.
Right.
And the question I wanted to have for the mayor and for Leon is a $12 million surplus, or putting it another way, a 200% increase in 7 years of your surplus. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
What happens to the $12 million?
It sits there and earns money. It's invested in a fund, and it's available, it's ready cash.
But a dollar isn't worth as much this year as it was.
7 years ago? Well,
You know what I'm saying, the buying power is way less.
is that my phone or yours? It sounds like my phone.
Sounds like you've done.
That's what I think.
It's not budgeted 3.4, actual 12.2.
Okay, what is it?
The 12.2 is the cumulative.
That's cumulative, not total. When you say total, that's cumulative
Yeah.
surplus.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a
That answers the question.
And then we use a certain amount of each year.
Every year we,
Yeah, no, that's why it seemed like, that's why it didn't seem like it was 2.1 plus 2.3 is not 4.5.
so in
So-
2016, we had $4 million sitting in our hands, and we used 2.1 of it as revenue.
Okay,
This year, we have 12.2 million.
Right.
And we're using 3.4.
gotcha. So the 12.2 is what, that's the total accumulated surplus over that period
That's
of
the
time.
balance of the surplus.
Gotcha, thank you. That
Totally.
answers it.
And so, I guess the question I wanted to kick around with the committee and with the mayor and the finance guy is, I understand conservative budgeting, but is this gap between conservative and actual generating so much money that maybe we shouldn't be doing it, or maybe we should be using it as a different way? Or why haven't we done things?
Emergency, you need that.
Emergencies, yeah, rainy days and emergencies I get, but is there something we could be doing with this money other than just letting it sit there?
Well, I hope it's invested someplace.
I thought we opened up the investment options, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. They have, and they are, this is now generating more.
Better interest, right?
Yes, better interest rates in return. So it's, for for the first time, we're seeing the benefit of having that amount.
Well,
But I've also heard where, people are saying, maybe we should be utilizing some of these funds and not capitalizing, all of the items.
That's the
that
other
are-
barbell.
Yeah, right,
here.
yeah.
It's a barbell. The one side of the weights is this huge amount of free money. The other side of the barbell is our debt service, which is, I gave you another chart on debt service. Our debt service is growing pretty significantly, and I would like to talk to the mayor and the finance guy about whether or not this debt thing is a good idea or a bad idea. We've got a total indebtedness already booked for $22 million over the next 15 years. And our debt service last year in 2022 was 3.3. This year is 3.7 million. Now, we're going more into debt,
Bless you.
and we seem to be putting things that should be in the annual budget appropriation into the debt bag rather than into the annual appropriation bag. And whether, whose idea was that? Is that a good idea? Why are we doing it?
Leon's pretty conservative, that's,
Yeah,
Leon, that's the
Yeah.
finance
Right,
guy
yeah,
you're talking about,
right, yeah. He's pretty conservative.
Oh, very.
Off the top of my head, I think we're allowed 3%, and we're at 1.2 or 1.3%.
Is that right?
In terms of debt ratio?
Yeah, the state sets,
Yeah.
the state sets the
Well, one of the-
threshold.
I guess, sort of tied into this a little bit is, where is the projection that looks at future needs, capital expenditure needs, over 10, 20, whatever years?
That's in the budget.
That's in the budget.
That
But-
is in the budget, and that we feel good about? In other words, that's really been poured over in terms of replacement of
So
buildings?
I think it's only what you know right now, right?
I'm sorry?
So it's only what we know right now. So, for example, they know that we know that we want to build a police department, so that's part of,
Right.
going into the schedule.
Hopefully more.
There's a replacement value for, we just changed, it would have been included for vehicles. Well, now we're going with an enterprise lease arrangement, so, that capital investment for those has come off the books from being in capital to be more of an operating expense.
Right.
So I think that, everyone has a sort of a vision of what's happening in the next 5 months, 5 years. I think it's hard to predict the changes that would be needed for the next 10.
Well,
So,
except that's really important, Maureen.
no, I don't disagree, but I think that it's, you could put something on paper, Rich, but right.
Hi.
Hi.
Our
Hi.
our guests have arrived. That's okay, that's all right.
Hey, Mayor. Good to see you.
We're- Well, maybe we should back up, okay? And get you guys up to speed. What we've been talking about, Zach, for the last couple of months is the state of the budget as adopted.
Right.
And what we're looking at in particular is sort of an overview of revenues, debt, and surplus. And you've got that list there in front of you? Yeah.
shared mine.
That's a little analysis we ran that showed the trend for the last 6 years. And I guess the first question is the gap between conservatively estimating a budgeted amount of revenue and the growing actual revenue, it seems to be growing wider and wider. And we want to know basically what you think about that, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or
You want my immediate feeling is it's a good thing.
tell me why.
Well, obviously, it means we had good seasons, but I think, and frankly, when we were hiring Kevin and talking about this, one of the biggest differences, as you all know, what are we at, 45 and 55% for the tax base, between parking meters, beach tags, and everything. So But the problem with that in budgeting is 55% of your budget could dip significantly. I mean, if you had a bad season, then you have a problem. And when, in talking with Kevin about that that's why Cape May is historically conservative on it, because so much of our budget is really, as you put it, Dennis, a business, where in a lot of other towns, 95% of their revenue is from real estate taxes, right? So their biggest issue typically is tax collection. Are we at 98% this year or 95%? And when we're 95%, we're down a little,
Historically, it's always been up like that.
Right.
Let me push back on that.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
And I don't mind that. That's, I think, the idea at least.
That's the theory behind
Yeah.
the gap. But if you look at our revenue pie, the biggest number is property taxes. The next biggest number is the other fees, which are the things you talk about in terms of their susceptibility to seasonal changes.
Just because it's hard with the color, is 45% is the real estate taxes?
Yeah, the biggest piece of the pie there. The pink piece is the local revenues, and that's things like licenses, fees, parking meters, the room tax. And those things are significantly up because of, well, a couple of years ago, we raised the parking rates, and then last year we did the occupancy tax. So you can see why that, in 2002, for example, hotel room taxes, we budgeted 1.4 million, and we actually received 3.06 million, which is over twice as much as we budgeted. Now, we knew that was coming.
Yeah, right.
We knew that was coming.
When we changed the occupancy tax, yeah.
But the point is, the susceptibility to the variances of the economy on that pie chart don't really create as big a problem in my mind as the property taxes being at 45%. It's always going to be there. We're going to collect property taxes. The other thing is, we're also looking at that, is it 17% surplus? We're using pieces of the surplus every year. And that's ready money. There's no variability about that. And our surplus, it seems to be growing faster than we need to have it. You know what I mean? If you look at that chart we had there, our surplus, it's $12 million now. And the question I think we want to discuss is $12 million too much of a surplus? Because it really is, over a 7-year period, it really is 206% higher.
Dennis, and also, what do you think percentage-wise our surplus should be of our budget? And it's just,
I don't have an answer to that, but the bigger question I have is if there's that much money there, should we be spending more of it?
Sure. Well, remember, there's some big ones coming up. We have budgeted already the police station, but we really don't have
Going
budgeted.
in the capital.
Yeah, but still kind of in our waterfall of debt. What we don't have is the water plant, desal plant.
Right.
We don't have for the seawall. I mean, we have general capital ideas of how much this, and goals to set for how much it would be. But the fact is, for both of those, which are obviously two big projects, it's going to have to be a lot of grant money, a lot of I-Bank. And I-Bank is forgivable debt, 50%. Then you have USDA loans, low-interest loans. And then we're looking at, congressionally directed spending for both the seawall and the water department. But then on the seawall, we're also going for FEMA funds. And the FEMA funds are at 70%, 30% match. So the way we have that structured right now, which isn't finalized because we're trying to find money from every source, but FEMA would be 70%, city would be 30%. Now that 30%, we can come up with partners to pay for it. It doesn't have to be out of the city's coffers, but right now, like, for instance, the county pledged for close to $5 million. So they're pledged for $5 million. We're trying to look at DEP and Army Corps money to fill in the gap in other areas. So my point is, we have to find out, and we will soon, some of the funding sources, yes or no, or half of what you asked for, or whatever, kind of piece all those together. But when your point really is, we're going to be spending money, and some of that surplus will be used, I'm sure, for water department, seawall project, and hopefully none of it, because we get all of it in grants, but I just remember that those are looming big projects that are,
And that's actually, the fact that we don't know what the grants are gonna be, Jim.
right, we don't.
Did last year, so our 2022 grant revenues was much higher than the projected for this year, because you have zeros in all those accounts, because you don't know what you're gonna, I understand.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So the state doesn't have any guidelines as it relates to how much a city, because I thought they did with school districts as to how much they could keep in surplus, but I guess not.
Good question, I don't know if they do.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, I thought they did it with school
It's a
districts.
good question, I don't know the
I
answer
didn't know
to
if
that. Yeah.
the state had any recommendations along those lines, et
I
cetera.
I think it's.
Some states do.
I think it was a good question that you asked. What should
Yeah.
it be? And-
Yeah.
And if the
Yeah.
answer is we don't know, well, then maybe we should try to get a better gauge. The
Well,
public perception right now is we have all the money in the world.
Right.
Pave the streets with gold.
Right.
Why don't we do more things? Why do
Right.
things take so long?
Right.
Well, it's because you're running the city collectively.
Right.
You're running the city in a way that is extremely healthy. We have one of the healthiest municipal economies that I've ever seen. So that's a very positive thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you do have these big ticket items that are out there.
Right.
People don't even know when Pittsburgh Avenue is going to be completed paving.
Right.
They're not thinking about the desal plant. They're not
Right.
thinking about the seawall project.
Right,
So maybe there is an opportunity to remind the public about these
Right.
projects that are coming and talk about the fact that while that budget, that surplus seems like a lot.
Right.
We have these projects, one bad season.
Yeah,
One
right.
hurricane.
Right.
A lot of that gets depleted. We have to plan for those things.
right,
But at the same
right.
time, I don't think it would hurt to check and see if there are
Yep.
other best practices out there with other.
Yeah,
With regard to
But
thresholds.
Pittsburgh Avenue is all county, right?
right,
I'm
Right.
just saying that people complain about
right.
Yes,
Because it's
The roads,
It's still,
the roads.
right.
still viewed as our road, right?
Right, right, the roads.
And I think that the other point is, Zach, just the brief time that I've been on council, we find that there are unanticipated projects that come up. Like Lafayette Street was not something that anyone had any.
$1.7 million.
Yeah, 1 point, plus there are costs that come to being able to do projects like that.
Right.
Engineering costs.
Right.
And permit fees that have to go. You know, so it turns out that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes costs that come with doing any one of these projects, that it's, right now, with both the water desal and the seawall, and we didn't even touch on the dune vegetation management plan, which needs to be done and probably is going to take some investment. You know, those are things that, you know, are just part of being in this coastal community.
And the budget adopted has the wish list of, it's $27 million of capital needs that we would like to address. How much of that are we actually going to be able to do you know?
I'd have to look at it, Dennis. What are the bigger ticket ones that,
Well, it's, the seawall's in here for 6 million.
and like, see, I think that's a solid guess. And that comes from an estimate of like $25 million. I mean, it's a big number, but 70% paid through FEMA, 4%, I don't have my calculator, but the 4%, $4 to $5 million from the county. I know that's a big, but I can't remember what it was. 4 to 5.
Our shopping list is 27 million, but we're actually expending 345 million. We asked for only three, that's, one of those is a grant. We only asked for 145,000 of that in the budget. Is that accurate?
I don't know what he's referring to.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
not
so-
sure.
This is the 2023 for that year. So street improvements, 4.7 million total and we're looking at capital improvement in 2023 of 65,000, and looking at 200,000 in grants. That's where, and then amortizing or
Yeah, so-
authorizing the debt
So
there.
down here is the total
Yeah.
figure of 145,000, that, not counting grants, that we're going to use for capital improvement.
Hoping that the other money's coming in from, yeah, because they don't know about the grants yet, yeah.
So we're gonna fill in these other numbers with actual appropriations if and when. Is that right?
Yeah, so then, goes to the latter years, so just using water and sewer as an example, it's 10.5 million. In 2023, we're looking at 1.5, 8 million would be the big bogey in 2024, and then another million in 2025. That gets you to 10.5. Whether or not, how that's
Yeah, right.
funded and where it comes from is yet to be determined.
So I guess
That's the
my,
what? That's the D?
The
That's the
desal, that
desal
might be
fund.
our portion of it,
And what would we have in '24?
8
8 million.
I mean, I'd be really happy if that happened in '24. I mean, it really, that would mean that we got a lot of funding and we're ready to go.
Right.
You know, I mean, so
Right.
hopefully that happens, and we will get some of these decisions within the next 6 to 8 months and kind of know the direction that we're going. And I don't want to, we need the funding. You know, we need the funding.
Kevin, what's the depreciation period for that?
For the desal
For
plant,
desal, yeah.
I believe it would be 40 years.
Yeah, that's what I recall from the
40?
consultants.
Yeah.
That's what I recall being stated.
We can keep our fingers crossed on that.
we can't bond for 40 years, can we?
Yeah,
You can for some of the,
sure.
I think for some of the things that they mentioned.
Yeah,
I just
oh, I know you can, I know you
Yeah.
can,
I
yeah.
thought that it was permitted for something of that size.
So we don't, yeah, because we don't have any bonds sitting on our plate right now any further back there. There was one in 2005, a green trust issue that we're still paying for. But that's the oldest one we've got,
2005.
yeah.
Well, the convention hall,
That's gone, that's paid for.
when?
Well, Leon mentioned that it was off the books already.
I thought we had one more year or even more, actually, but I could be wrong, Dennis.
No, this I got from your shop, right?
Convention hall.
The
I
old,
believe it's on, I sent you all the schedules that we have.
yeah, yeah.
And convention hall's already
I
paid?
believe so, yeah, it's on.
That must have been, maybe that was 22 at the end of
I
22.
think it was.
Okay, wow. That's
I
great.
can believe it's already,
I know,
Yeah.
wow.
well, and it's falling apart, never mind.
So the germination of this discussion was around that 45%, 55%.
Right.
The 55% is not all at risk. If you look back at this.
Yeah,
with the
right,
pie chart.
right,
There's only 6.3 million that is what I would call elastic. All right, that's parking fees, that's the hotel taxes.
And that's the pink
Right.
pie.
The other line items really aren't going to vary very much.
Which one's 17? I'm just,
Surplus.
That's the
That's
surplus.
surplus.
oh, okay.
So the issue of, it's not that the businesses are contributing 55% of the revenue to the city. Businesses are actually, even though the part of the property taxes are from businesses, the local revenues is only 13.6%. It's about $3.2 million that comes directly from business use. So the implication of we should be raising property taxes because we're leaning too heavily on the businesses, not all of the numbers add up in that way.
Yeah, I see that. I guess, I think the main question is, where do you think the surplus should be? But I do think, and I think that should be a goal for the city, you know, moving forward. But I think that obviously one of the factors is, what are you using the surplus for otherwise? I think everyone would agree, if you have to do it for the water department, then do it. You know, I mean, if you have to do it for,
Spend it on any damn thing.
And
Right.
by the way, there's an interesting coincidence that the amount of money that we take from surplus and apply it to revenue is almost equal to the debt service.
say that one more time?
The amount of money we take from the surplus and use it
Okay.
into annual revenue is equal, almost equal to the amount of money we pay out for debt service. So I guess you could say, correct me if I'm wrong, we're paying for,
I mean,
we're using our surplus to pay our debt service.
right. I mean, you've seen Avalon has almost, I think it's Avalon that has almost zero debt. You know, I mean, they try to fund each project individually. I mean, Cape May, I don't know really if we've ever been in that.
Not that I know of.
No, and I'm not so sure I totally agree with it either, to be honest with you. Like, when we funded the firehouse for 1.59%, I mean, I would bond that for a million times over, you know, I mean, rather than paying for that out of surplus personally, but, you know.
Yeah, and the rates, our portfolio, as Kevin's data shows, our portfolio is we refinance to go down to the lower rate.
Right.
And so we started out paying 3.1, 3.8.
Right.
Now we're down to 2.2 and we refinance. So that's a good thing. We're taking
Yeah.
advantage of the market.
Thank goodness
And
we
we're-
did when we did.
Right, and we're getting higher return on our money that is in there, so.
The
it's-
only other issue that was raised, and Jules raised this, the Taxpayers Association raised it, what's going into bonding that should be going into current operating expenses?
There's a good argument there. I don't necessarily agree with everything that goes into our capital bonding, but I think a large majority of it totally makes sense. The other parts, I think, is a little bit of a negotiation, to be honest, on people on council, people and department heads, and so I don't think any one individual on council perfectly agrees with every little thing that's in there. But I will say, I think the arguable things that are bonded for are pretty low percentage of the bond. I know that's not a great answer for you, but you know.
I think, you know, going into the budget next year, it'll be something that we can all maybe take a closer eye to. We were in a period of transition.
Yeah.
And I think that there are some things that one easily could look at and argue for being in the operating budget versus being, you know, in there. But the majority of it, the greater majority of it should belong in capital. But there are some things that are really, you know, just on the surface appear to be, you know, easily something that you would put into an operating
And
budget, so.
I'm not saying this it was COVID related. The city did not have capital expenditures in 19 and 20. So we were kind of making up for a lot of really, important stuff, like ambulances were put off.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there could be a reason to do that outside of a COVID issue or what. I mean, hey, we can put another 10,000 miles on this ambulance or whatever, you know, but there was a lot of things that weren't purchased in 19 and 20 that should have been, whatever the decision was. But obviously with COVID, that there's legitimate conservative budgeting, but we had some making up to do, you know. I mean, so that's one thing I would say in defense of some of the capital expenditures that we bonded for.
The other thing that this committee was one of our recommendations, which the council endorsed, was getting general operating expenses out of that account and getting it into utilities where it belongs. How are we doing with that?
Pretty good, to be honest. I think we've really moved, and it was a good point. I don't know why we didn't do it sooner. I mean, the beach utility had room. I mean, we can't operate at a surplus. So we had room to put more expenses, especially into the beach utility. We have, you know, and we did that through legitimate fire calls or police calls to the beach. So you could say that we were servicing the beach, and there is some obvious funds that are going toward the beach. Our restrooms were in really poor condition, yet we had money in the beach utility. So we've been fixing up the restrooms. And we have another project going out to bid, hopefully within the next 2 months, for behind the beach tag office to convert that into restrooms. and that'll be out of the beach utility. A lot of more equipment has gone into the beach utility that was used in the beach utility. I will say we've done more with the beach utility than the other utilities. Water and sewer we're operating in the black, but not by much. And as you know, any increases to that is just going right to the payers on the water. So there's not a lot of wiggle room there, is the point. Tourism utility coming out of COVID, even the year after, whatever, COVID's still kind of going on, or whatever you want to say, but even last year, you still had the effects of it, of cancellations of weddings that got pushed back so many times, or concerts that got pushed. In any event, still operating in the black, but not by much. So what can you really add to it? Now, this year, we've added, like the facade that was redone at Convention Hall, those kinds of things. The next one, of course, will be HVAC, which will be a big project. We all know that we've been getting a lot of bills to keep that functioning. Well, we've gone out to bid and gotten a lot of state contract quotes and things like that for the
Placing that,
HVAC.
right.
So that'll go into the beach utility.
So when
Now,
you look at
tourism.
their revenue-
I'm sorry, tourism, thank you, tourism
When
utility.
you look at the tourism revenue page, there aren't a lot of places where they could generate revenue, except tourism and fees and events, which you did, by the way. It was 96 in 2022, and it was 300,000 in 2023, so that's a big jump. But where else, other than the siphoning off of the room tax and the mercantile fees, where else could you generate revenue in the tourism?
I don't have a lot of good ideas for that. I mean, I just, the fact is, it's based off of the fact was, we were losing a good amount of money on the concerts. Now, there's reasons for that. I mean, we lose money when we have a kid's soccer game, I mean, it's how you want to look at it. If it's a community event.
Yeah, it's an
and things like
investment
that.
in PR,
Right.
is what it is.
I thought we were losing more money than we should have been, and as you all probably remember, council took the step to basically lease the hall to the performers through the booking
Promoter,
agent,
yeah.
promoter, so that essentially the promoter was paying a nominal fee to the city, but we didn't take on the risk of low sales and things like that. And that's worked. It's no home run because we're making a couple $1,000s or
Right,
something like that.
right.
But we're not taking on the risk.
Right.
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 Yeah,
I'd like,
Like a lot of incentive for, so all of those like all of the additional revenue that you get from other sources because bigger shows are coming in.
Exactly. I mean, that flows down to restaurants, the room tax for people coming and wanting to do that, or onto the island to go out to dinner or whatever before or after a show. Yeah.
it put it on the promoter.
Yeah.
The promoter, I mean, hopefully they bring in better acts because they have their own, financial incentive.
Right.
I'd love to move it into the next phase eventually, which is, better acts, more income, but it's a hard.
Yeah, it's a fine
It's a
balance.
whole big project that,
and the design of the versatility is not there for
No.
larger events.
right.
If you also look at the budget, it's clear that for the last several years and probably going forward, about half of the revenue supporting the tourism utility is going to come from occupancy tax and the tourism assessment. Because it did this year and it probably will next year.
I mean, the goal is for Convention Hall to be like self-liquidating
Yeah,
itself. I
self-sufficient.
mean, we don't want to have to take from, occupancy tax and this and that to stay in the black. I mean, we don't have to make a lot of money on it, but it should be able to meet its expenses. I mean, it's not a lofty goal, but at least that would make things easier for the budgeting of it.
But the cost of running the hall includes operating costs, and the budget shows.
Yeah.
The budget shows zero for that.
Operating.
So that's coming from.
No.
There should be other expenses budgeted too.
It's somewhere else in the budget, but it's not in the tourism utility.
Okay.
So,
I'd be interested to know that, Dennis.
For the staff and for
No,
other
the-
expenses?
the
Yeah.
staff is there.
Well, what other expenses would you have?
Staff is salary. and
About
wages,
air
50
conditioning?
hours.
What are you talking
We're talking about
Electric?
electric, building, utilities, maintenance, repairs,
It should
That should
be,
Yeah, in the other expenses line item under,
700,000? Is that it right here?
yeah, is that other expenses?
Okay.
Yeah, it should be baked in there.
Okay, all right, okay.
but Dennis, if you do see anything like that, bring it, bring it to my
I will.
attention,
But that went up, okay, all right, okay.
The goal definitely is to have all of the real expenses in the budget, all of the real revenues,
Okay, that's,
so we know exactly where,
that's what our recommendation
Right.
was, to, at least those kinds of things should be gotten into the budget of the utility, okay?
I'm sure a lot of these are historical. In my mind, it's hard to separate beach from tourism.
right.
mean-
I know, yeah.
It almost would make sense to collapse them and manage it in totality.
Well, I would say except, well, until Convention Hall, the debt service on that came off. It probably was best to keep it separate so that you could at least identify that, not blending it in.
Mr. Elwell, I mean, I don't really remember this, but wasn't it really just to, when they're building Convention Hall, to kind of show that this could be
Well,
self-sufficient?
that was, like you said, was the goal.
Yeah. And for, it's been close. I mean, it hasn't been like some really terrible thing for the city or anything like that. I mean, the years that it's been off in the hundreds of thousands. The years it's been up, it's been in the hundreds. So I would guess it's probably pretty close to breaking even, really.
Well, and-
It has been for the last couple of years.
And now we're going to have to replace the HVAC, which is going to be several hundreds of thousands. So
Yeah.
it may not be the time to start looking at a blend, because there are other things that are needed for the beach.
Right.
Potentially the expansion of
Yeah.
the Beach Patrol headquarters,
Right,
for
right.
obvious reasons. But,
Right.
so there's reasons why maybe now might not be the time for us to collapse those two. It makes sense logically, because they're sort of married to each other. But at the same time, I think both have unique potential investments and things going on that would be cleaner at this point to keep it
I
separate.
always thought about having a task force to look at Convention Hall to see how they could generate more,
Right.
do more different things.
It's a good idea, Bob.
That's just, I
Yeah.
always thought that's what
Yeah.
should happen.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, Casey's, I think that she would take any creative ideas, because it certainly looks, she's vested in, as the director. She's got staff that are there. And I'm sure that people, I mean,
No, I'm not saying she's doing anything wrong.
oh, no, I agree, but
How many
yeah.
days,
Helpful
how many
to the
days,
city
how many
that-
days a year
Yeah.
is it being used?
Yeah.
How many,
Somebody
I-
to talk to.
Good question.
how
Don't
many
have
days a
any
year
idea.
is Convention Hall being used? Percentage-wise?
Yeah, percentage-wise, I don't know the answer, first
Yeah.
off, but the one thing I will say to their credit, like this year, they had, the roller skating was great,
Right, right.
which is always great, but then they did the indoor pickleball, which we hadn't done before. So I do think they're moving in the right direction of use of the facility.
I think
because-
that was a great opportunity with the indoor pickleball. I
Yeah.
mean, because people want it, and if it's
Right.
available, you're filling a need that doesn't exist.
As everyone has always said,
Yeah.
it's heated.
Yeah.
Let's
And,
open the building.
and what
you
it
know?
does is it takes it all out of the noise and nuisance factor for people surrounding it, which is
Right.
one of the biggest challenges that people find in communities. That
Right.
there's a very clear divide between people who want it and people who don't want it. So, there's an opportunity right there.
I think that's great, particularly given the popularity of pickleball and there's no other spots, so.
But I think like a task force to come up with more things like that.
Creative
I
I
do
that's-
think,
Absolutely makes sense.
knowing that we're operating at basically flat, if the community can get more use out of the building in the off-season, I mean, would be great.
Well, I think the Nature Center's using it for their,
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
know we're going there, yeah, I mean,
Well, the
it's,
high school's going to use it for the
Yep.
prom.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's
We're drifting away from revenue issues, but
Did the mayor have any other suggestions on areas that we should tackle to look for?
I did. I talked to Maureen about this a little bit. I think it's it's not an easy one. It's a little bit of a project, but an obvious one. So I'll go through this really quick. And I know everyone has an opinion on this, but to get more to the point, parking meters are getting harder and harder to service. And a lot of towns are actually getting, most of the shore towns are getting rid of their parking meters, or at least not replacing them when they're broken. And for instance, the Welcome Center has no parking meters. We just have Park Mobile, because it just didn't make sense to put the physical meters in there, and it's working just fine. People are, the other thing is, if you don't have a smartphone, there is a phone number on there you can call in. We did it yesterday, or a couple of days ago. It did take me 4 minutes and 30 seconds to get to someone, which could be kind of annoying. Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. And I could barely understand the guy I was talking to, but in any event, it's possible. But most people do have their smartphones, and it is moving that direction. The other one, too, that of course the city has is kiosks, basically only around the mall. And those are getting harder to service. There's a change up, and in fact, our service agreement ended June 30th. One company bought another, and for about a week there, we were thinking we're not even going to be able to have service this summer. Now, the thing is, in the mall, just like the rest of town, we already have Park Mobile, okay? So we would have to put up a lot more signage to make people aware of, okay, this is Park Mobile, et cetera. But the bottom line is this, and I hesitate to say this if our Park Mobile friends are watching, but hoping that they're not. We're not going to expand Park Mobile any further until we renegotiate the contract.
Shouldn't.
Right. So, and also there are competitors. So it would be annoying to switch, okay, but there are competitors, and if we had to, we could. Kevin started to look at some of the numbers, and I think, what was it, it's like 3% credit
Yeah,
card?
so for each transaction, the user would have to pay 45 cents. We would pay 15 cents plus 3% of the overall transaction cost.
So say you're going for an hour, you know, and in certain areas of town, that's $1. So you're talking $1 with a user fee of 45 cents. That, of course, that doesn't affect the city, but those are our guests, and frankly, I see that as our money. They're paying to park in our spot. But, so the user's paying 45 cents, 15 cents for every
15.
transaction? Every transaction is 15 cents plus 3% credit card. So,
Right.
I mean, you're talking, now that's on $1, and a lot of times it's more than $1, but think about, for $1, we're getting 82 cents, because it's 3% and 15 cents, right? Is that 15, 16, 18? Yeah, so we're getting 82 cents, and they're paying an additional 45 cents from the customer standpoint. So it's a lot, and really what I'd like to see when we renegotiate this is, are there other options? What are the competitors? Should our credit card fees be at 2%, which I think they probably should be, because I just, from business, $1 million business can get a 2% interest rate on their credit card. We're definitely over $1 million business for our parking. The 15 cents definitely should come down, you know, so but what are other towns paying? I really have no clue, and we're kind of just getting into this, but
Right.
to me, it's a definite contract that's not that great, and if we're going to expand Park Mobile, then let's not do that before
Right.
those conversations.
So I did have a conversation with Marty and Steve. We're working on more of the shared services agreements, but this kind of felt like something that we could at least take a first run at, figure out, meet with Kevin, figure out where, you know, where the numbers are, talk to Eric about the challenges that he's having with, you know, the equipment. And then, you know, get a hold of the contract and then start looking at other towns and what other vendors are out there. I mean, obviously, you know, at some point, we're going to have to do an RFP. Probably makes sense to do that in the fall at the latest to make sure we've got enough information. to make an intelligent decision. Also, to make sure that we're ready for the season. And if we had to switch for whatever reason, if we couldn't negotiate ourselves into a better situation with Park Mobile, then be prepared,
What,
you know.
on a dollar right now, when you consider the cost of picking up the, the change in the machines and the repair, et cetera, what do you think you're getting now out of a dollar?
So that's a good question. So Park Mobile is an easier answer.
Right, no, I
Yeah.
understand that. I
Right.
was thinking,
But
when you,
like
I
for
don't
a
know how many
kiosk,
people
Yeah.
are putting money in the kiosk. I see a lot of transactions being done by credit card.
Yeah.
Only because, so many people are not, because you can't, I don't know that it gives change. I think you have to have kind of an exact $3 if you're,
Right.
doing it for that. That's my impression and recollection. So I see people doing a lot of credit card
I
transactions.
was talking about the parking meters themselves.
Oh, the meters,
But
oh,
the
okay.
answer to your question is the city doesn't, that's what I looked at. Wait, do we have like a report? And we don't.
You don't.
So, like, here are the costs, though. The kiosks themselves are expensive items.
Sure.
Each of them have a cell phone bill because that's how they communicate with the
Right.
credit card. So they have a 3G or 4G, I think it's 4G, but a 4G credit card, cell phone. Then the maintenance contract that we have. So we have a real dollar, maintenance contract. And when it comes to the meters, actually, Lou Belasco got all of North Wildwood's meters
Did he?
because they pulled them and we got those. But and we got 1,800 meters or something like that. But one of the reasons they pulled those meters is it's getting harder to get service, it's getting harder to get parts, and it is labor intensive.
Yeah.
Every day, somebody think of
That was the
that.
point I was trying to make, is
Yeah,
you're not getting a dollar
right.
Off of
right
that.
now.
No.
Right.
There's no
No.
way you're
Right.
getting a dollar
No.
right now.
Exactly.
Plus the behind-the-scenes maintenance of them, and the fact that at the end of the season, all of that has to.
But they're
By the way,
going
I
up
just
and down.
looked- I just looked up in New Jersey, there are 8 competitors to Park Mobile in New Jersey.
Okay,
Okay.
there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Share it
Zach,
with
question on-
Marty and-
Question on the Park Mobile. Do they give you data? Do they give the city data as far as how many meters are being used, how long the usage
Durations,
is?
yeah, yeah.
That people,
Yeah.
And that's a valuable thing, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I've never seen a
Yeah.
report, to be honest with you.
because from my standpoint, that's the type of, having that type of information, that puts us in a position to be able to
Right.
negotiate with them.
And know what we would get if we went to an RFP with a couple of
Exactly.
other competitors.
Yeah.
How many metered spaces are there? How many meters are there in town?
I should know that number, I don't.
I think Eric is probably the person that I have to talk to.
I don't know.
There are reports.
Yeah. Yeah, the reports, we get,
I have that report, that
Right.
it's by zone, not by meter.
Are we adding meters outside the Rusty Nail to the new curb line that was put there?
good question. The answer is yes, probably not meters. It'll be Park Mobile signs. So that, if we get that done, we're working with the county to do it. People are already parking there anyway, right now.
That's why it is.
And what'll be important on that one is the site triangle for the cars exiting, right? So we won't get as many as we like to, but we believe we should be able to get 11 spots there. And hey, when I think they average around 2,000 in that area, so 11 spots.
Yeah.
It's,
That's a high zone.
and you
Beach
try to
end,
find parking
yeah,
down there.
right.
It's really, really hard. So having the parking and the revenue, obviously, but
I was just curious when you talked about numbers.
But that would be the breakdown that I'd love to see, is how much are we making on a dollar from a parking meter, from a kiosk, from Park Mobile, So, and we don't have that information now.
And then understand what your options are going.
Right,
And
Right.
what it would take to change that all over.
right.
So when you came in, Zach, we were in the middle of a discussion, and just to recap a little bit, we're talking about the difference between budgeted revenue and actual revenue, and why it's such a great span and growing greater. And we all know that everything's conservative. Are you comfortable with that span of?
Personally, yeah, 'cause I see it as really conservative budgeting, because I guess that's my fear, personally being a business owner, just that who's to say I don't have a 25% down this year? And it's a possibility, you know, I mean, we could have really bad weather on key weekends and a hurricane or whatever, that I mean, obviously, I'd much rather be safe than sorry.
I mean, even the beach tag, you get 2 or 3 weekends with bad weather. I remember.
Even like Irene, remember Irene? I mean, that was like Labor Day weekend, and it was like a ghost town
Yeah.
a week after Irene, you know?
It seems like almost
It's a lot of money.
the reference, like when we talk about something as a surplus year after year, it just sounds like extra money, right? But when you talk about something as a reserve for, like, it sounds like a lot of this total surplus is being thought of as reserve for future capital needs, for the, so maybe it's really just how it's being
That's a good point. Yep.
referred to.
Right.
And right now, we're making 4%.
Yeah,
that is a
yeah,
good thing.
right.
A lot better.
Yeah.
Which actually compounds the problem, because we're gonna have the
Yeah, we're gonna have more surplus.
embarrassment of riches.
Right.
Well, let me change the subject for a minute, because it's something on our agenda too. And we're talking about the municipal budget here, and in balance, it's in very good shape, and it's hard to argue with a lot of it, most of it, if not. But probably the biggest impact on property taxes in this town is the school funding formula. And this committee recommended over a year ago
2 years ago.
that we approach our legislature. We did.
Right.
We went up and spoke to Van Drew about this. I think he understood what we were talking about. There's been nothing on this, and that's, what can we do to light some fires here?
I thought the best approach is the one we took, which was the, military base.
Yeah, it's the pilot program that we recommended.
Right.
And you haven't heard anything from him?
No,
obviously. We have-
because we all know why. It's an unpopular decision
It's not there.
for more population than our population. Now, the military base issue, I think everybody supports, because I think the Taxpayers Association had the number of the amount of Coast Guard children at the school compared to locals. It's clearly a Coast Guard school,
Yeah.
besides my kids.
Right.
But, and a few, and a lot more,
Not
but,
the elementary school.
but it's clearly a Coast Guard-based school,
Now,
you
the
know, I mean.
elementary school, probably if it were just that issue, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it.
Right,
It's the regional.
It's the regional
Right.
formula, which
Right.
is never going to be changed. And the only way to do anything about it would be the thing we suggested, which is the payment in lieu of taxes issue, which could be slipped into a federal appropriations act or any federal law with the stroke of a pen. And I'm just wondering why we don't get a little bit more aggressive with our congressman to say, why haven't you at least tried to do something about this? Because it's not, we're not going to change the formula. We don't want the formula. He can't change the formula anyway.
Administration or
Right.
Republican area.
We're going to have to, he's going to have to basically tell us why he's not going to do this.
right.
I'd like to get a little more aggressive on this.
I mean, I understand why, obviously. I mean, it makes sense to me. It's just, we've gotten no traction.
You need to assign somebody to it. I mean, you have to hire somebody to do that work, because they have to stay on it.
And that's,
It's almost like a
It's almost
lobbyist.
it's a
Yeah, it
lobbyist.
is.
yeah, it's,
And the other thing, and Zach, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, we're also looking for, to him and others for assistance
of
with
others.
FEMA and DEP
Yes.
and other things and other
That-
big
that answers the
projects.
question.
And so, I know that there's sort of a little bit of a dance here.
Absolutely.
How, if you go after this, which we all recognize, is the appropriate thing, but at the same time, how many times are you going to be able to go to the well on even larger projects? And I'm thinking of the water desal, I'm thinking of the seawall, and some other things that we really need that other funding and support for. So, I mean, it's the political game. So I just put that out
What was
there.
the savings, Dennis? What did we calculate the savings would have been?
Well, it would be a plug number if we probably,
Well, I thought we made an estimate, though. as
we
to
had
what
$1
it
million.
was. That was $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, Maureen,
And I want to
It's
push
like
back on
you-
that, too, because
It's not, I'm not defending it, I'm saying that there's, in my mind, there's always a reality of, how many times you want to knock on the
But if we
door.
don't rattle that cage because we're afraid he might not help us with our
Right.
desal.
Yeah.
That's a little bit,
Well, then I say
Well,
rattle
and
the
it's
ca-
year
right.
after year after year,
Yeah.
it's not one project.
Right,
And so when you
right.
project it forward, it's really.
I'm not
a
saying
lot
not
larger.
have the discussion, I'm just saying that sometimes you
Yeah, to pick
sort
your
of have
battles.
to pick your priorities. And it
you have
may
to
be,
finesse, yeah,
this
yeah.
may be, a follow-up to say, hey, listen, we're wondering where things are, we haven't heard from you, knock, knock, kind of a conversation.
But who is it that actually approves this? Who would approve this change? Where would it occur?
it would occur in the staff of the congressman's office, who would slip in a one-line addition to,
An appropriations bill.
it could be attached to any piece of legislation, not just an appropriations act. And it happens regularly down in Washington. How much was the last Biden budget? 10 billion, trillion, $1,000?
So you're saying our million would be like a little,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be like a
like
dot,
like a pebble in
the
the,
size of the period on one sentence.
Well, and with logical, it's rationally related to a government cost, so,
Between a real problem in this town where he represents.
yeah.
And if he's gonna be as petty as, I'm pushing back.
I know.
He's gonna be as petty as saying, I'm gonna help you with your desal
Mm-hmm.
plan, because you're making me do something I don't wanna do for some reason.
Right. Understood. Then what about the local leadership within the state, getting them involved to push on him? I mean, it all trickles down, right? So, what about, Mike Testa? What about the House of Representatives? Those guys, they,
I thought we did talk to Mike Testa about this.
I'm just saying, like, use the local leverage to go back and say, listen, hey, Mike, we didn't get anywhere, we haven't heard anything, can you help us? I'm sure he's talking to him on a
Well, the
more
whole point of
frequent
that
basis.
recommendation, however, was
Yes.
to avoid the state legislative.
I gotcha. Yeah, I understand that, I just meant a offline conversation, I don't know.
Or what about through the Coast Guard community? How is that?
They don't really, I mean, I wouldn't say
Leadership.
that they have an interest in really,
Sure. It's being paid one way or the other.
yeah, I mean, that they have their own priorities, right? I mean, they have their
We
own
want to be
issues.
careful too, because they're good citizens, and we like them in the communities.
Right.
We don't want to,
And it's-
Yeah,
and it's
right,
not their problem.
And it's not really
It's
not
really
their
not their
problem,
issue.
yeah.
I mean,
They
they're-
didn't create the
Right,
formula.
right.
All they're doing is doing their job and sending
Right,
kids to the
right.
regional school.
Yeah.
the last thing we want is the Coast Guard to think we're not interested in.
Having them as part of the community, yeah. So I don't know that they,
So
Well, I don't really mean a general population Coast Guard community. I imagine that they have,
through the Department of Justice?
yeah, like a
I
senior
don't know.
leadership
They're
type.
they're in the Department of Homeland Security.
Oh,
Yeah.
Homeland Security.
As any state agency, federal agency, they guard their dollars pretty
Sure.
heavily. They don't want theirs. Which brings me to a corollary issue.
You're spinning all over the place today.
It's not spin, right back where
I-
we started. I'm sorry. The whole disastrous effect of the funding formula goes about because of the property valuations of the communities of Cape May. And if there's an issue that's going to rattle the cages of taxpayers in this town, it's going to be the revaluation of property values. And I cannot believe it hasn't happened already.
When did it last happen?
2004.
Wow.
And the state law sets what they call the director's minimum, which is supposed to be when the difference between your assessed value and your aggregate property values approaches 85%. In other words, your taxing value is 85% less than your actual value. You must revalue all of the properties in your town.
right.
As you can see by this list, this entire county is out of compliance with that law.
But
I thought
isn't there?
I thought it was 80, Dennis, but
You know-
it is 85, okay.
Dennis, one time I asked Lou, the question, when are we going to have a revow? Not too long, many months ago, but he said, he looked at me, he said, when Lower Township has one, we'll have one.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, doesn't the
That was
county,
his answer to
the county dictates when it
And
occurs?
here's the problem, because back in October of 2022, 8 months ago or so, the taxation board considered this issue and was told that they must revalue as soon as possible. And that the only thing holding it up was the fact that there's only 2 firms that evaluate properties.
Right, and,
Statewide.
right, and it requires door-to-door house inspection of
It's a
everything.
massive amount of work.
And, I mean, just because we just had a recent conversation about this, and it will be hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to engage with one of those firms, I understand, yeah.
And-
Which will be easily paid for by the result of it.
Right, exactly.
But
And the
it's-
impact of this revaluation is going to create the biggest problem among people who have lived in this town for a long time
Oh, yeah.
and have an unrealistically low property value. The rate will change. It's going to be. Disproportionate. It's going to be approaching catastrophic, especially
Yeah.
for that reason. And secondly, because the property values of Cape May are factored into the regional school district formula.
That's the thing.
And we are going to take a massive hit, when that formula is reapplied after the revaluations. So,
Unless the other townships revalue as well.
they will have to, they're going to have to, because the county's probably going to come in and sort of make them do it.
But to your point, Martin, Cape May's values are kind of disproportionately, even more so than Lower Township or whatever, increased.
But not according to this. I mean,
Well,
we're in the
it
ballpark with
depends.
all the other.
Our failure to meet the minimum is not the worst one in the county, but the point is, their property values are never gonna go as high as ours are. So we're gonna wind up actually being behind the 8 ball because of what's happened to the real estate values of Cape May City for the last 5 years. All of this extreme development is gonna come back with a price tag.
Yeah. But Dennis, you know, it's jumped from Cape May to West Cape May, you know, now it's up in the villas, it's just.
It's everywhere,
You know,
but-
the values, because I've owned houses in all those towns.
They're all going up.
Yeah,
But
and
let's say, if I can use my hands as an illustration, here's Upper Township, and here's Cape May. Well, when they revalue, it's just gonna go like this. It's not gonna go like this.
Exactly.
So the percentage of the hit we take on that formula is probably gonna be the same after reval as it is before. But the only difference is it's gonna be more dollars.
You're correct in saying that the
Percentage,
people that
you
have been here for a long time will take a massive hit.
Yeah.
I would offer, we probably have a higher percentage of properties that have been revalued because of a renovation than other towns. I mean, my taxes went almost doubled. So,
No, that's gonna
That's
come out
true.
in the wash when
so
they do
there's
the
so many
Right.
projects that have been undertaken in the last
Right.
5 years alone.
Right.
That those values
Yeah, and
have
when you-
jumped.
Right.
Probably not true in lower.
Right.
Maybe not.
But it is going to be a problem for folks who have lived here for a long time, who have not done a lot of work on their house. It's going to be a big jump.
Because it's about the land, oftentimes, it's
And
not.
I don't know
about
if
the
there's
house.
any alternative. I don't know. Yeah.
I can remember when I was in office, Joe Fox he was on this stuff all the time, and they wanted to do a revow, and he found out like Jersey City hadn't done one for 40 years.
Wow.
It just happened
it
a
was-
couple of years
Huh?
ago. Yeah, Jersey City just had its reval like 2 or 3 years ago, and downtown Jersey City property taxes doubled.
Yeah, it was really, he was.
And it was a lot, exactly what you're talking about. It's
So
a
what's the
lot
trigger?
a lot of people who had
What's the
been in
trigger?
their homes for many years, who are on a fixed income because they're retired, or the ones who were displaced from it because it was impossible to pay those.
The trigger's already been activated
By,
by the formulas.
The ratio.
The problem is, the people who are supposed to be doing this are all whistling past the graveyard because they're trying to avoid actually doing this because it's going to be
Well,
catastrophic.
Dennis, the thing was, the assessor used to
Well,
be
you're not the one
doing
that pulls the trigger.
doing the work.
Right, right.
And,
The assessor-
and then they had the zoning, zone reassessments, and different zones. It should have been the assessor had been doing this work constantly, but that's the reason I asked Lou that question several months ago.
Well, can you, and I just don't know this process, can you not go to 100%? Could you get it up to 85% or so? I don't,
100%.
you have to, yeah.
Because every municipality, every county has agreed that 100% is the standard.
You have to go to 100%, and this is in terms of the valuation of the properties. It doesn't necessarily mean that the contribution, it has to be equalized. So those newer properties that were more recently assessed are paying kind of more of the burden right now than the ones that haven't been. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the funding is ultimately different.
And then the other thing, when a house is sold now, it's sold for,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of a revenue issue, this is probably the ultimate revenue issue for this committee to consider.
sold one.
Well, when you say it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be more revenue, does it?
No.
No, it's equalized
It would
across
be
properties.
equalized, the tax rate would just go down, right?
Right.
Yes, yeah. it'll
But
drop.
it's for the individuals who are affected.
No, I appreciate that. I'm saying from a city perspective, this doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be more revenue.
Correct.
But the houses that are closer to their true value will get actually a reduction.
Right.
Right.
The houses that are significantly below will get an
Right.
No, I appreciate
And
that.
the ones that are closer to their true value
It'll be
had
popular for some, not popular for
had the
Right.
means to purchase it in the first place, so,
Popular with me.
yeah.
So, I don't have a recommendation for any kind of action except this, that I don't think it would help us as a town if we waited quietly until this took place.
I was just going to say
I
that,
think we should start educating
Yep.
people that there's a tornado coming.
absolutely.
And
But
it's still gonna be a tornado, but
Do we have any idea date-wise when this?
No, I thought this was all dictated by the county
I
tax
thought,
assessor.
I think,
Yeah,
We
it's out of
were
our
led to
hands.
believe, just because there was a recent conversation about this, that this is not something that we necessarily take the initiative on. And I mean that, and not to say that there shouldn't be an education process, but I had the understanding that we would be directed, and the town, and in the county, each town or municipality would be directed when they were required.
the law's not clear about that.
Okay.
A municipality can take this on by
Okay.
themselves if they choose to.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think irregardless,
That's a tax
whether it's the
assessor.
county, should we not at least start? Because I think at the end of the day, he's going to hear this.
Well,
and you're going to hear this at the council meetings as if it's you're doing this. So I
It'll be
think
a
that,
public relations nightmare.
A nightmare.
I think the earlier you get the jump
Well,
start on it and explain it.
There's a
Then you're
timing.
also attracting attention to it, in which case are you pushing the county to accelerate the timeline on
Yeah.
it? So
The county is already pushing itself.
then the county should be communicating that.
I raised that issue in the minutes from their meeting back in October, because they know that they're behind the eight ball on this.
Yeah.
They know what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And so,
Zach, we probably need to have a conversation with
Imagine Stone Harbor and Avalon.
Oh, no.
yeah,
tax assessor.
yeah. Once
Worse than
we hire her.
Right.
It might not be a bad idea to
Yeah,
say
oh,
something
definitely.
next Tuesday.
Definitely.
Before
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Have they announced it? I think
Yeah.
you'd really be getting ahead of yourself if you announced it before the county announced they're
no,
taking
they
any
haven't
action.
announced it, but see, that's the problem. They
haven't seen
they know what they have to do, and they have not done anything about it yet.
Right.
That's okay for them if they want to do it that way. Our taxpayers are sitting here,
Right.
fat, dumb, and happy.
Unaware, yeah.
Yeah.
If there's something.
I guess, I'd push back a little bit. Why are you against starting to give our taxpayers a heads up that this process is going to take place?
I'm not against it, but if we haven't heard that this process is going to take place,
Oh.
I would say that
Well-
if the county hasn't announced, here's the timing, here's what's happening.
And there's a
I think
formal-
it's preempting It's kind of just like, there's a big scary thing, I don't know anything
And we
about
don't
it.
even know when it could
You know,
happen.
like-
If you're confident that the county isn't going to do anything, sure.
Well, I think
But
that
what I
there's,
don't think you want to do is to get into a situation where the county announces something, and it's going right in, and the taxpayers don't have any.
I agree with
I mean,
that.
I
If
think
the
we
county
have to-
announced it, I would definitely say
mean,
education around it is
like-
important,
like
and
soon.
who is driving this
And I'd also
process.
suggest, just to finish this thought, I don't know why it hurts us to prepare behind the scenes for that regardless.
Yeah, I mean, if they announce it today,
So that
ready to go
so we're
tomorrow,
ready to roll
rather than trying to.
with a.
Oh, absolutely, we should be prepared. I'm not sure what the value is in rolling out a lot of, like, I can tell, it's gonna be a mess regardless.
Regardless.
And I think, just having gone through this experience with my other property in Jersey City, I think if there had been a lot of commotion in advance of, here is the timeline and here's what's happening, it's going to be a lot. I think you have to kind of control what our role is in that process.
I think, I mean, we have, I'm not trying to preempt, I mean, we have a resolution on the agenda for next week draft. We've identified and made an offer to someone as a tax assessor, an experienced individual in the local community. And so I think it would be prudent for us to allow that individual to get on board. She's already made reference to this process, and that's where I'm getting this, where I kept saying that the county was going to be directing it and different threshold
It'd be good to
numbers.
have her here.
That's
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, I mean, I think council needs to have a conversation with her and say, where do you think this is? What are you hearing? Because there is a formal reporting relationship of the tax assessor to the county tax office. Yeah, so I think that we probably need to, and I'm not trying to say not get education out there, but at least give her a chance to get on board and say, okay, what are you hearing, and what do we need to be prepared for?
Yeah,
And
that's the
when
right
do we start
process.
that? I'm
And-
sorry, Zach, so.
No, and just on that, my understanding of the process is it's at least a year long, if not longer. So even after the announcement, I mean, there's going to be a ton of discussion on it, obviously, but-
And if we're
So
not
they
the
can't do
only
this,
one,
like-
First of all, they
No.
No, they can't. They have to come around to every property.
every property.
Every property, and it takes months and months
That
and months and
resolution is
months.
a good springboard to be able to make some.
Yeah,
comments,
yeah.
On Tuesday about.
Right.
How one of the very first things we're going to do is make sure that we have an action plan in place.
Right.
Yeah.
To deal with.
Right.
Reckoning that's eventually going to get here.
Right.
And then leave it at that.
Yeah,
And then
I
even
think-
after they've assessed every property, there's an appeals process. People think that it was unfair and how they were assessed, and then that goes on for months.
You have to
Oh,
have
there will
all of
be.
that, you have to have all of that infrastructure in place, so that's, and, to be able
Backcourt.
to manage.
There were lawyers
county.
reaching out to everybody who had a property in the process, like it is a.
What's the
it's a-
city role in this?
I don't know totally.
I didn't know if
know the
there's
tax-
staffing, is there staffing?
Yeah,
issue
definitely.
Oh,
with the
yeah.
city?
Oh, yeah.
But it's an outside consultant, right? That does.
You have to hire a firm, and I think,
Right.
Dennis, you mentioned, there's only 2 in the state, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Costly.
Right.
You don't have to wait in line.
Right. Oh, wait.
And then there's plenty of rollout of, education
And
seminars and
communication.
things like.
I mean, only because just in the brief amount of time that we had a chance to discuss this with this individual, I got a little bit of an education just to understand it. There's a lot more questions I think I would want to, have an understanding of before we would make, a more formal public statement on when, how it would work, what the impact might be.
And I went through this. at
Right,
my
and what
previous
the,
place.
and what the process would be, I think you have to have that program in place. You have to be able to explain all of the steps, and I wouldn't feel comfortable making that kind of.
Maureen, can I bring up just another random one, because I do have to go in a little bit, and I want to relieve Kevin as well.
Yeah.
You gonna leave Kevin here?
Yeah, I'm not leaving him here now. No, just a couple quick ones. One of our biggest concerns, on salary-wise, of course, was the major increase to insurance, not salary, but, in wages. And that went up 21%. Now, that was across the whole state, but major bump. actively looking at alternatives that would keep our employees with, the same doctors, same benefits, but look at some savings. I think one of the big concerns is there are people leaving, the municipalities leaving the state health benefits. And the ones that are leaving are the good accounts. Exactly. Okay, that could see a savings. And my concern is, I don't want to be left on the boat with the bad accounts. Because I think what's going to happen, of course, the state doesn't agree with this, but I think what's going to happen is the good accounts are going to leave, bad accounts are going to stay, and the fees are just going to keep going up. Right.
Yeah,
And
just
Cape
if I could-
May is good. I mean, we have low claims,
Yep.
we are an attractive client. Yeah.
Just to give you a little bit of background, my background, I actually ran the state account
Okay.
for Aetna, and.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I'm very familiar with the fund.
Right.
The South Jersey Fund.
Okay.
It's well-run.
Right.
It's been in place for years, and I would strongly recommend that you all look at it very carefully and seriously, because it has saved year after year, almost every year, not every year, but almost every year.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It's definitely worth,
I mean, your background, I didn't.
yeah, that's what I did. for
That's
40
What we
amazing.
try to do as an MTRAC committee, we have
I know, it's always impressive.
Right.
And I know the people that run the.
I was
fund.
going to say, do you have a
I know the
contact
people that
person?
run the fund, yeah.
So it might be something that we should do for a council presentation, or at least an executive session, Zach, I mean, to
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
about.
I would suggest you bring
Yeah.
in their top couple people.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
and I suggest that you maybe get involved in it.
no, I'd be happy to. I mean, I
We'd
know,
be
and I'm not involved I'm retired, so I don't have any stake in that.
Caveat I wanted to do right from the beginning is, the employees, of course, are nervous.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them.
Right.
Right.
So I don't want to, I'd love to
Preempt
send
it,
you into
right.
the fire, but,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
No, I think
No,
you have to do this the right way.
Right.
And the right way is
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying, and that's to give them an opportunity
Right.
to look at the roster of doctors. Hospitals at this point are pretty well set.
And I've done it on the employee side, having
Right.
been on the healthcare side of it. I've actually been responsible for conversions when we've gone out of big plans into something that was more, one plan kind of offering. And it is very much about the education. And one of the things that we did, I'm thinking back when I was at Jefferson, is we had an open house, and the representatives were there. And they sat there and they went through individual conversations that were, sometimes an hour at a time, to be able to say to that employee, tell me what your concerns are, and to be able to show them on their website exactly where their doctors were, what options they would have for lab work, radiology, down to, the detail. And what services that they offered that maybe they don't have right now. Everything from gym memberships to,
Right.
mail for, their pharmacy. I mean,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of creative things that, insurance companies come up with to attract people into these kind of programs, so.
The only other thing I'd say is that the other concern that you should have, you sort of raised it, is that the state was looking at each of these pods, if you will, in a separate fashion. So you're right, as groups leave, the better groups leave, the groups behind will not, you are not part of the state pool. You are, in other words, you're a local.
Right.
Right.
And you're not treated the same as the state pool. And that, it's understandable why the state did it that way,
Yeah, absolutely.
but that's just the reality.
Yeah, but I think with more numbers and being competitive and more attractive in these other programs, because.
Well, that's my point, is
Yeah,
he's not
yeah.
part of the state pool, he stays in the state.
Yeah.
Because the state employees themselves are in a different pool.
Right.
Than the locals. You're called a local.
Oh, yeah.
But I just want to say this publicly for anyone listening, and it's 100% true. We're not going to change if we can't get it to be obviously a cost savings. That is the genesis of this discussion. Is it goes up 21%. It's our fiduciary responsibility to say, can we do better? But we have a responsibility to the employees, and I'd say publicly, the benefits have to be equal, if not better, than what they receive today
Right.
before we consider anything else. Just want
Right.
to say
And
that.
there- They have to have, it has to sort of be, it's their level of confidence that
Right,
they're getting that.
right.
And that's why you.
You're doing it the right way.
Right, take the time to have everyone give them
Usually
a
it's a
chance.
good year-long process for people to be comfortable.
Right.
So you know.
Well, a year-long process is getting started up here today. Well, before you go, quickly give me an update, if you'll give the committee an update on the proposal we made on raising the fees to reasonable rates and cost of living attachments. Is that going to happen?
Well, I think the fee, I agree with the fees totally, that it shouldn't be a political football. You know, one administration is pro-business and one's not because they raised a mercantile license $5 and one didn't or whatever. You know, I think that is always kind of ridiculous. But so tying it to interest rate, whether that be CPI, whatever we think makes sense to me, so that it increased. I think one question I want for, the clerk's office and those is, do we just make it a flat percentage based off of 50-year average interest rate or something, so that we're not like
Nickel
looking
and
at the
dime in this.
CPI on December 31st, and, if it's up 5% on that, whatever, maybe it should be a flat 2% or whatever.
Yeah, and our recommendation was to not do it every year, do it every other year.
Right. So would that be tied to what rate?
Well, we had a cost of living increase from the Department of Labor's stats.
Department of Labor, yeah.
Which,
Trailing 24 months.
I was going to say at least
Right.
a trailing 24 to 36 months.
Yeah.
Because there's just been so much variability. But Zach and I had talked about this, and, I said,
There's
let's,
two parts of that recommendation. One was to get them up to the current rate and then do the COLA. So that's going to happen.
Right.
but we had talked about taking a look at this in September in anticipation
Right.
of the 2024,
Right.
and just making it part of the budget prep for 2024.
Right, and
Do
that was a-
you think change,
Right.
actually, I'm just thinking, is it silly to have, $35.62 or something like that? I mean,
Yeah.
let me talk to the clerk. I know nobody cares about that 30,
Right.
34 cents in
Right.
that scenario or whatever.
Our feeling was, in general terms, that 25 to 30-year-old stale fees need to be updated.
Yeah, right, understood. We agree.
And the sticker shock of 45%.
Yeah, right,
$15. It's
right.
And I think that's what we have to be,
talking
yeah,
about 45%
Well,
increase, not
right.
$15.
right. That's the sensitivity of the public discussion. you
Right.
know. It's not the percentage, it's the
Thanks for
actual.
your time, Zach. I think
Okay.
You wanted to get out by 5:30, we couldn't help you, but it's close.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Fine.
coming.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, and really do appreciate everything you guys are doing. I mean, lots of good work, so.
Thank you.
See ya.
How was my belt?
By the way, I played back in October. Number one horse in Pedalo.
Can I just have one moment? I just want to share with the committee, these are our low-speed vehicle pamphlets that are going to be mailed out to the, everyone who has a mercantile license, and also code enforcement's going to be distributing them to some of the hotels, B&Bs, guest houses, et cetera. We met of the vendors who rents or delivers onto the island. They all have them. They will be giving them out as part of the rental also. So this was a way to really try and blanket from a public safety standpoint, making sure people, understood, what the speed limits are regardless of the vehicle that they're driving, and two, that we are serious about, enforcement when it comes to utilization.
I got one thing to say. I think these scooters are going to be a big problem this summer.
Can I give one more?
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Here, I just want good news, otherwise I wouldn't have came back. But the firehouse we are somewhat behind schedule, I guess you could say, but we're close to completion, somewhere around July 1. I was really hoping for June 1, but I think we're going to be really close to July 1. Look, so that's good. The change orders have been really minimal. But I obviously give this update because, it's a big bond, $5.1 million. But I think change orders will be under 3%. So we're really, I mean,
Yeah, that's big.
there's a municipality that had a change order on the firehouse in South Jersey of
$5 million.
$5 million. That was the change
Yeah,
order.
that was the
Yeah.
change order.
I mean, it was
They didn't have a
accepted.
choice.
But and that was kind of the same timeline we've had. So it's been well managed, and I have to say, to the credit of the professionals that we hired, they really did a nice job of putting it through. We got a lot more work to do to get it finished, but financially, it's in good shape. So anyway, yeah.
By the way, I had just one curious question. On Lafayette Street where the emergency project is taking place.
Yes.
That could be paved by the summertime?
Not the whole street, just where they opened it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue it's going to be better than it was before because, in all seriousness, where a lot of the potholes were like breaks in the sewer pipe and
I know,
things like that. Yeah.
I knew that the paving was,
Lafayette Street's going to be a disaster for the summer. I mean, there's no way around. I mean, it's been a disaster for a couple of years, but we were really hoping, for instance, they're going to be paving next week from Perry Street to Colliers to Lafayette Street.
Right.
So that'll all be paved and completed.
that's part of the original county project.
Right. Now, the county was supposed to do from
Liquor
Collier to Ocean. And I was really pushing for that because they did a good job getting the pipes in, so everything's done. The county's concerned about compaction and settling. Yeah. So, and the thing that stinks is we're probably 2 to 3 weeks short, but in any event, it is what it is. So they will repave what the existing, and there's like an apron right now that's wide open, I don't know, like right at the end of the street. That will be obviously paved. Pittsburgh is, I think, complete maybe today.
No.
Not quite, okay.
No,
Okay. Yeah, it's nice, it's nice. And then you still have some little check punch list stuff that they have to do. But the good news in all of this is everything is bid out. So they have to be completed by Memorial Day of next year for all of Beach Avenue and all of Lafayette Street. So this year, Beach Avenue won't be done. All the utilities were put in where they needed to be. Yeah, wish I could give you a better update than that, but,
That's right.
yep,
Thanks.
yep. All right. Yeah, it's good. Yep. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Zach, for coming.
So anyhow, those scooters, I'll tell you, they go past my house. I don't know how fast they're going, but they're going fast.
know that they're able to go past like 20 or 25.
Do we have anything in the ordinance about renting those?
So the one company that was,
Somebody opens up a
Oh,
shop
I'm
to
sorry.
rent scooters.
There is no ordinance.
yeah,
I hate to be a killjoy here, but let me just say, this pamphlet was a great idea. It's short of what we had recommended. What we had recommended was an ordinance requiring the registration of merchants.
So that never went through?
Never.
No,
Oh, my God.
So right now, anybody can come in and
and they still will continue to do that, yes.
Are you talking about on the golf carts or the?
yeah, the golf, low speed. And the reason for that, part of it, Dennis, was that there really was a big lift that was going to have to be placed on the city clerk's office. And, with all due respect to them, it would be at the same time as the mercantile license. So, it didn't seem that, at least for this year, that, that was something that, I was more concerned about making sure people understood how to operate these things and what the rules of the road were the first year out. Not to suggest that we should not revisit that for next year, and make sure that they, that if there's a program in place, has to engage the clerk's office to make sure that they have the
Okay, yeah,
infrastructure.
I
Yeah,
understand that whole
yeah.
thing, but our work as a committee is revenue-based. And our proposal was that there currently is a workload, a service load on the city budget that's not paid for, because merchants are not registered in the city to have these vehicles here. The proposal was that to mercantile license these folks so that the revenues generated by that licensing will pay for enforcement, or at least offset enforcement. Now, the brochure is great, I have no problem with the brochure.
By the way, take some credit, I mean, I think the committee, hopefully Maureen agrees, had something to do with, the fact that.
Well, no, it was one of the reasons why I didn't want to see that the issue completely die, which was why I took it on. And I don't disagree, Dennis, that there's probably about only 4 companies that we're talking about here. And one of the questions that came up in discussion was, are they going to be, looking at charging, and I said, that's not something that I'm here to discuss with you right now. I wanted their buy-in, to be honest with you, to be a partner in making sure that we were trying to do what we could to ensure that people, when they were renting these things, understood that they are a motorized vehicle. They're not for children's, use, and that they need to, sort of. Yeah, I did. Yeah, with Deacon. Yeah, and Deacon was there, and Mayor Sabo was there. She really was thankful because, she's got the same challenges, for in West Cape May side. So we did it as a joint effort with Mike Yeager and I as the sponsors. So, I think that I think that there's opportunity to go back to that conversation, but I really wanted them to be on board and feel like, from the city's perspective, we wanted to partner with them to get them to include these in their rent when they are delivering these carts. I think for this year, we're going to see a huge uptick in this, and if anything, the safety aspect of it, I think we really need to be focused on, because there are so many different things out there on the street, from bicycles to electric bikes to these vehicles, cars. I mean, we all recognize that, it's competing.
And I would bet,
Scooters is that, can any bicycles rental,
Yes,
rent the
again,
scooters?
let me just give you some background on
That'd
it.
be
The
crazy.
scooters
These people.
and the electric bikes are all covered under the protection of a Governor Murphy order that these conveyances will not be subjected to any regulation whatsoever.
That's my worry.
Because he recognizes them as an alternative transportation source. It's happened in New York City. It happened in New York City big time. It happened probably up where you are too. And the green agenda says alternate sources of transportation get a free ride. These bikes and what have you are that part. And again, I'm not saying anything but good job on the pamphlet, but I want the committee to realize that the recommendations we make are based on revenue.
No, and I absolutely agree, Dennis, and I think that the 4 or 5 businesses that you're talking about, if that needs to be included and evaluated for next year, then we do it as part of the summary of, in preparation for the budget,
Okay.
along with the other fees.
All right,
that
let
we're talking
me
about.
throw one more thing out, Martin. I talked to the chief the other day, chief of police. He's ready for a phone call from you to review everything he has in his budget. He wants to give you everything he's got.
So just very quickly before we adjourn, we've made good progress. We've met with Kevin. We've sort of got a bit of a game plan together. We're collecting the agreements. Obviously, Lou leaving slows things down. Mercantile season slows things down. But we've got the core agreements that we have. One of the things we have found is actually the municipal court agreement with Cape May Point expires in less than a year.
Oh, good.
Okay, so that will be sort of, what we're looking to do is develop a methodology.
Didn't I send you those agreements too?
Sorry?
Didn't I send you
Yeah.
okay, all right.
What we're looking to do is develop a methodology for how do we want to see the charging work going forward. Doesn't necessarily mean we change what we charge, but we should know how much we're receiving as reimbursement for the expenses. And actually, municipal court in Cape May Point is a good starting point, because it's a very small one. The police ones are 2025, end of 2025. We have a little bit more time there. But the subcommittee is working very hard on this. We're leaning into we're making good progress.
And the chief wants to give you everything he's got.
Yep.
In terms of the full and total cost.
Yes, right.
Yes,
Yep.
right, which Kevin is also going to be giving us, so we're going to have two.
Yeah.
Kevin's going to be at the meeting with the chief when we're going back
Yeah,
through
good.
some of that.
All right,
Yeah.
that's great.
Maureen, if I can be of help on that employee benefit thing, let me know. 'cause that
Yeah,
is-
I'm
that is
going to,
my-
yeah, absolutely.
Thought of yours.
I'll find out what the next steps are. I know that they were talking about it, and I know
I
that.
promise I wouldn't push it, because I wouldn't push it anyway.
I,
No.
I wouldn't wait, because he'll start to forget things, so.
No,
And that could easily happen.
Amy,
Haney, I'm
Haney.
sorry, I just.
H-A-N-E-Y.
H-A-N-I-E.
I-N-I-E, right, right.
H-A.
Does anybody have anything for the good of the order?
Nothing for the
Anybody?
good of the order. To
No?
adjourn for the good of the order.
Ran a little late today. Who wants to make a motion to adjourn? I got it. Gotcha. Okay. I heard that motion, I heard a second, I heard a vote. Yeah,